All right, 7 on the dot. This meeting pretty much officially marks me in this job for a year, and I don't think we've ever started at 7 on a dot, so that must mean something. Welcome, everyone. Thanks for coming and joining us tonight. If you could please stand and repeat the Pledge of Allegiance after me. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Rory, will you call roll?
Yes. Councilmember Gettle.
Here.
Brown.
Here.
Robinson. Here. Glover.
Here.
And Sperry, I believe, is coming.
He should be coming as far
Should
as
be
we
here
know.
soon. Okay.
All right, we're going to hear from Chief Larson for the Unified Fire Report.
Good evening. Happy New Year. I trust everyone had a great Christmas and New Year's. I know I did. We had a lot of food, but no fruitcake. Sorry, Councilman Gettle. I did read where historians have not really written about the fourth wise man because he was turned away from the door for bringing fruitcake. So, sorry I had to do that.
We appreciate it.
First, I would like to mention that this coming week, starting Monday, we'll be training all the fire crews, all the crews, 50, I think it's 52, 54 fire crews through the whole month of January on the new inspection software that we're going to be using. It's called LIV, Life Safety Inspection Vault. We're really excited about it. That means we're going all digital with our inspection processes. Some great tools in there to help the fire crews and to help our community. It's going to be a collaborative effort using more of a consultant-like approach to work with the business owners as a fire safety team. Some really great tools on this, some really good data gathering tools that we're going to have, so that we can kind of look at where maybe some problems are and focus our efforts more and be more targeted in our approach. Really looking forward to that. We're using Station 126 in the conference room to train the crews. So we had a couple of crews here in Midvale test it, and everyone we've shared it with so far, it's just a fantastic program, easy to use. Very user-friendly, so we're excited about that. This is big for us, going away from a paper process. The budget process begins. All the divisions are very busy working on their budgets to get ready to present to the chief and our finance director, and that starts the end of this month and into February. And then meetings are going to be happening over the next few months with the benefits coordinator, the budget committee, the chief, and leading toward the presentation to the board finance committee in April, and final approval scheduled for June. We always start early and try to get ahead of this, and I feel we have a very transparent, well thought out budget every year, so looking forward to getting through that process. UFA is starting Recruit Camp 56, February 6th, with 36 new recruits. After rigorous training for several months, they'll be able to graduate. That's going to be May 24th at the JATC in Riverton. As we get closer to that, I'll get some information out to everybody. Quick holiday safety message. I sent this to Laura to post on your Midvale social media accounts. Winter storms, we just had a big one here recently, but I suspect we're going to get some more, and we wanted to remind residents of home fire safety tips to keep in mind during the season. smoke detectors, carbon monoxide detectors, an escape plan. All those are mentioned, plus a lot of other details that I won't go into, but that'll be on social media site. And again, I know we mentioned this last month, but after 45 years in the fire service, Assistant Chief Steve Higgs retired officially December 31st, and we're going to miss him. I sent a link to a video tribute to his 45-year career. Sent that video link to Laura, and that will also be posted on some of the social media sites if you'd like to take a look. And that's all I have for tonight, unless there are any questions for me.
Seeing none.
Okay,
Thanks so much, Chief.
thank you.
All right, moving on to public comments. Any person wishing to comment on any item not otherwise scheduled for a public hearing on the agenda tonight may address the city council at this point by stepping to the microphone and giving their name for the record. Are there any public comments? It's okay. Yeah, you'll have 3 minutes, and just please state your name for the record.
I'm Michael Tidwell. I'm a resident of Midvale for 2 years. We have a private road that we have access to our properties with. There's 4 twin homes and another one that added onto the driveway to now access our private road. Just so things don't escalate, I just need to know where to turn to in case there becomes an issue with regards to paying for snow removal. Also, we have a issue with CenturyLink that dug a hole in the ground that is now caving in, and it could actually cause a sinkhole where the road goes. So where could I turn other than a private personal attorney? Is there anybody in the city could give me any kind of legal guidance?
So a couple quick just questions for understanding to make sure I get to the right person. So when you're saying that CenturyLink did work and it's causing that cave-in, is that on a public road by your property or on your private property?
It's on the private road that leads to our properties.
Okay. And then, okay, I think that answers that. When you're done, what I'm going to do is, Glenn, will you work with him to get his information and then make sure we get to who we need to in order to deal with that? Okay. Glenn Kennedy is the Public Works Director, and he will work with you to make sure you get to where you need to be.
Okay.
Probably meet you out right now.
Okay, thanks.
I have a couple minutes before.
Oh, what I meant was, Nate, will you?
10 minutes.
Sorry, I forgot you're up next.
I'm up next?
Yeah, you're pretty.
Pretty much.
Yeah. Nate, would you have a moment to go out and talk to him? Sorry, thank you. Nate is the Assistant City Manager, so that's a step up.
Sorry, Glenn.
It is a step up. On all accounts.
All right. Are there any other public comments?
Mayor, I did receive an email from a constituent who would like me to read a message that she would have delivered tonight, but I think she had to work late, if that's okay. The resident's name is Ashley Thomas, and she lives at, let me think for a second, Euro Drive in Midvale. Dear City Council and fellow residents, I'd like to address the issue of overnight city street parking for RVs and trailers. With the recent snowstorm that has made a huge task for the city snow removal folks who have been working tirelessly to get roads clear, thank you, by the way, for your hard work, this issue, among others, has come up. I totally understand and respect the need for safe, effective snow removal on our city roads, but the current system becomes an issue for those of us who live in the crowded apartment complexes with inadequate parking. It's not just RVs, but our regular vehicles also do not have enough space in the complexes and often must park on the street. And those of us with RVs must park them on the side streets. We diligently move our RV every 48 hours to be in compliance, but the overnight and snow rules leave us with no options other than overpriced storage that we cannot afford and cannot access conveniently as we work toward our dream of home ownership. Indeed, city rules should exist to help make folks' lives less complicated, not as a means to punish. So what can be done so that streets are able to be plowed, but folks can reasonably park and access their vehicles when needed? Given other issues around this I've seen raised by other local residents, I suggest that we keep the 48-hour rule for street parking, but do away with overnight RV parking restrictions as well as snow restrictions and instead adopt the alternating street side system used in so many other places. Excuse me. During morning hours, one side of the street and sidewalks would be plowed and parking would be prohibited, and during later morning hours or afternoon hours, the other side of the street and sidewalks would be plowed. This gives people ample time to move before plowing, helps keep streets clear for plows, lets folks know when to expect their street to be plowed, and ensures folks can keep their vehicles handy and close by. This also ensures those of us who have RVs, buses, trucks for work, et cetera, are not penalized but still maintain our vehicles by observing the sensible 48-hour rule. Thank you for your consideration and sensible approach to snow removal and large and regular vehicle parking, and thanks for your hard work. Much appreciated. Ashley Thomas. And I hope I kept that under 3 minutes.
Thank you.
Yes.
All right, are there any other public comments? Okay, seeing none, we'll move on to the reports. Since I'm up first, as I briefly mentioned, I just want to say, as of tomorrow, actually, it will be a year since I've been in this office, and just wanted to quickly say thank you so much to this council, to staff, to the public. It has been a incredibly challenging and stressful and rewarding year, and I'm still glad I did it. Ask me again in another year if that's still the case. That's a joke.
We will.
But I really am just so appreciative of everybody and how welcoming everyone here has been, so thank you. Also, I hope that everybody had a great and relaxing holidays. I know that my family and I got to go see my wife's grandmother, took some time off, which was great. And of course, the last couple of days, we have had a fair amount of snow. I think I was seeing that it's one of the larger snowstorms we've seen in this state for a while. And just really want to thank Glenn and our Public Works team. I know that they were working nonstop for quite a while to try to keep up with it. And I think it really, too often this work goes unnoticed, and the amount of pressure that we can put on to our staff, specifically these individuals who are driving these plow trucks, who are working these night shifts, trying to do both a regular job, be with family during the holidays, and having to work these extra hours. And I was proud of the work that you all did, and just really appreciate it, so thank you. And with that, Glenn, I want to invite you up to talk about some of the snow removal response that we saw this last couple of days.
I better take a water. I brought the laptop up here just in case I need to refer to some materials. But I'm just kind of gonna give a recap.
Please don't do that.
Recap. Starting 7 a.m. Sunday morning, so the morning following New Year's Eve. I got up, so did the storm lead, who was kind of covering. There's some vacation issues at this time. Checked UDOT cameras, made the determination it's time to get out. Called in a full plow crew, so that's seven drivers. Then we have 2 10-wheelers, 4 bobtails, and 1 flatbed, which is probably the truck that you saw, Quinn, in your circle. That's kind of his role, is clean up. The first day.
What's a bobtail?
Okay, sorry. A 10-wheeler is a full-size dump truck. A bobtail is minus an axle. It's slightly smaller.
Can you, while you're going over these, the
abs-
amounts that we have in each of those, so how many 10 wheels, how many bob
I
wheelers?
just said what we have. That's it.
Okay.
2 10-wheelers, 4 bobtails, and 1 flatbed pickup truck.
Is that
which
5, 2, 4?
It's 7.
Oh, I must have missed one of the.
Council last year approved a Salter for the small truck to help win the circles, and then we had another truck without a Salter, a bobtail. That helped out immensely. So those 2 additions last year have really helped. But as far as total, I should go back. I'm only going to speak to road clearing tonight. I'm not talking about the parks trails, the facilities and City Hall and
the lift stations and all of the sidewalk type stuff that we have to do as well. This is strictly clearing roads. Where was I? Day shift focused, 10-wheeler. Did I get the difference between that and a bobtail?
Yep.
Okay. 10-wheeler holds about 7 tons of salt. Bobtail, 3.5, 4, just to kind of give you a. Day shift solely worked on mains and priority streets that first 12 hours. There was very little time available to get the neighborhoods. It never stopped, right? So we just needed to keep the main traffic rolling. The night shift came in, shifts changes were at 7:30 a.m. and p.m. And they were tasked with start cleaning in neighborhoods, don't let the mains get out of control. And that night they were able to get through about 2/3 of the neighborhoods, one pass, while still kind of monitoring the mains. Excuse me. One thing to note, we did have a lot of utility operators that aren't, excuse me, who ordered the pie? We had other people from other divisions that don't plow quite as often. So that might have impeded us a little bit that evening. But the next morning, the day crew came in, finished up the rest of the city about 8 o'clock that night. So there was 36 hours of nonstop plowing. The only time that anyone got pulled out of their truck was a few tree issues and a couple power line issues, but it was mostly just to coordinate and move on. We were lucky in that there were only a few minor mechanical issues. These trucks take a beating, a lot of moving parts, a lot of hydraulics. They break down a lot. We've got one fleet mechanic, and during the breakdowns, he happened to be performing his snow removal duty out here at City Hall, so he was already on site. We got that up and running pretty quick. Okay.
What is the typical breakdown that's happening on these vehicles? Just anything, or?
It's random. Mostly it's hydraulic hoses. Levi and Brian. Levi is the fleet and facilities manager. Brian Ortiz is our mechanic. Try and get ahead of that, and we pre-make the hydraulic hoses. There's specific lengths and fittings, and so if they break, we've got them on hand and can try and slap them in real quick. Those are the biggest ones. Salter issues. But those are the ones we plan for because they're the most occurring.
Glenn, I've got a question for you.
Absolutely.
As you say, so we've got 7 total and 36 nonstop hours. Were those 7 trucks out that entire time then?
Yep.
I mean, understanding that there's blips
Yep.
here and there, but
I did require them to split their crews in half and take a 45-minute, go sit down at Denny's or whatever, get some coffee. But we had the other half out that whole time. They switched, but for safety reasons and get their brains back going, something I required of them.
Glenn,
Yes.
there's one thing I think we need to sort of discuss. I
Okay.
get the theory of the cul-de-sac waiting. You know, those are dead last, right? But when the snow's 9 inches deep and it's wet, like this is a very East Coast like snowstorm.
Yes.
You guys created some pretty dangerous situations for the cul-de-sacs. It'd probably be better just to do the cul-de-sac, right? Because when you wait 9 inches, there's boulders of snow that were 3 feet high. And our favorite
So-
part was on Coolidge, on Sunday and Monday, people just waited to watch people get stuck and then they helped them. Like our neighbors were pushing people out, even yesterday. Your truck got stuck. One of your massive trucks got stuck on our road,
Common.
right? So if a huge, truck that is made to travel on the road with the snow, tried to avoid the cul-de-sac, turned, piled up a ton of snow, and his tire was just spinning. No one went out and helped him because it's not like anyone feels like they should push a.
And then he left.
He eventually got it out. The good thing about him, and I wish I knew which person it was, because they made a second pass to clear out, because it was a mess, right, to back and forth. So he, instead of just taking off, he made a second pass, which was brave, because he could have got stuck in that same spot again, but he kind of had to haul. So, you know, like Olympus Circle, it was just pushed to it, right? So we need to, like, it's like a full wall that we need to find a way to not do that.
Okay. So I will address that, and I've got some kind of longer-term solutions.
If it's 3 or 4 inches and you pass, it makes a little bit of a mound that people can just drive through.
Yeah.
So, I mean, we're talking like higher than people's front of the hoods, boulders, like that just needs to be cleared out.
Yes. Don't disagree at all. So the way the current plan is set up, and I guess for perspective, there are 125 circles and dead ends in the city.
I totally get it. It's a pain.
So what we currently have is the big trucks are doing when they're in the neighborhoods, they're doing the main roads. If they look in a circle and it looks like, yeah, there's not too many cars and my truck will fit, they will go do a in and out. And then the small truck, when it's available, comes and cleans it up. That is probably causing the issue, along with some inexperienced drivers. I mean, we're dealing with some new employees, first time in the city, first time in a plow. So there is room for improvement, and I kind of will get to that later, but that is something we will address. Preliminary plans I don't want to go into fully now because they're not completely vetted, but it is on our list.
Yeah, I think there's just when it's a certain depth, it creates a bigger hazard. So
And type of snow as well. This was heavy wet.
Perfect snowman snow.
Okay, so characteristics of this storm that were out of the norm, just besides the duration. Extremely wet and heavy snow, lots of water content. The mayor was kind enough to send an article, and I breezed through it today. But this snow has 52% more water than average snow. So it's really heavy. That means our plows need to slow down a lot. I don't know if any of you are on the roads on, my days are all mixed up, Sunday, when it was really slushy out there. My truck was spraying slush. I was getting hit by slush. A plow is going to even push it farther. So we really had to slow down. Last year we did install in-house our fabricator, Jason Bryan. I don't know if you've seen on some of the bigger plows, there's kind of a rubber flap that hangs off the side. That's to try and kind of slow and stop that. I'm sure that the guys were tired of hearing me slow down, slow down, slow down all weekend, but they did, and it paid off. Typically with this type of snow and this type of incident, we would have a line of 20 or 30 mailboxes to go replace, fences down. There's another article on KSL where you wiped out Clinton. Yeah. That's what happens when you don't slow down with this heavy snow. So the heavy snow causes us to slow down. It also, correct me if I say it wrong, Matt, exacerbated. Close enough. The tree breaking, or the limbs breaking on the trees, because the snow was so heavy, that's not a typical snowstorm. And the sagging and down power lines were all caused just because of that heavy snow. It's not typical, generally. So those sagging power lines, they not only impeded our trucks, but some Ace trucks and Rocky Mountain and the communication companies. I'm sure the sinkhole. I'm sure they're getting hammered with requests, and they'll respond as they can. Trees. Oh, yeah, the windrows are also much heavier. Let me explain a windrow. As the plow goes down the street, the row it leaves on the side is typically referred to as a windrow. So if I say that, that's what I'm talking about. That heavy, wet snow created difficulties not only for staff but for the residents. It it's not a normal windrow, it's an ice block windrow, right? We're taking every precaution we can, but there's really not a lot we can do. It's just part of living in the valley. When these snowstorms hit, you're gonna have to dig yourself out sometimes. But we do understand the frustration. We do what we can, but there's just not a lot that we can do. A tip, though, Brody Kessler, he's one of our plow drivers, plowed a 12-hour shift, went home. He's kind of got a little beater in front of his house that he commutes with, and it was buried. Apparently, he just took up a tow strap to it, and give it a yank, and you don't have to dig.
That's not advice from the city, by the way. No one is suggesting that.
Windows. Oh, and the other thing that did affect in a number of ways was it was a holiday weekend. It was right after New Year's, right? Meaning people are at home, they're not at work, equating to way more cars on the street, way more cars in the circles. That's part of the reason that I conceded to shut down the night crew last night. I was going to have one or two trucks just working circles, working that, but I decided to wait till this morning, and hopefully some of those cars are gone. So, also, city staff was trying to holiday a bit, and there were folks remote, and so that there were some communication issues, but overall, I think we did really good. Okay, and we get in. I'm taking way longer than I thought I was going to. Quick data, because you hear me talk about iWorks all the time, and you know we're getting it rolling. But here's some good data out of it. This snow season, we've had a total of 7 snow events that we have responded to. That pie is killing me. The first 6 storms. And again, this is just street clearing, not any of the other snow clearing duties that we have. The first 6 storms combined, we had 629 hours of total labor. Some OT, some mixed, but 629 total. And we used 445 tons of salt. So that the average of those 6 storms is 105 hours and 74 tons of salt. So far for this storm, because I don't have today's data, we are at 260 hours. The average was 105. And we are at 342 tons of salt, where the average was 74 on the previous 6. The previous 6 weren't like ridiculous, but they were pretty good storms. And in my opinion, I thought we did a pretty good job, and the community's happy with those storms. This one's a little different. It's a little stronger. But I'm going to ask you to remember this storm when we go to budget retreat as a benchmark storm. We kind of know we're reaching our limit. It appears from some of the comments, right, that this might be the storm size threshold that we need to look at. And if service levels need to increase, then I can try and come up with what that's going to take. If you're happy with it, we're probably okay. Keeping in mind that, and this isn't an exact science, but I'm thinking we still probably have 10 to 15% margin of improvement from this storm. We've got some new folks. Bobo's a brand new streets lead, first big storm. You know, there's some other extenuating circumstances. I've got some thoughts on the circles. There will be some improvement, but I'm thinking this is kind of anything past this, and people are going to need to be pretty patient until we get through things. Does that make sense?
My wife had a question. A statement more or less. On Center, she was driving on Sunday morning, and she sees like the line. She watched the West Jordan trucks like turn around exactly on the line. Is that like is that a thing with you guys where you don't cross any
The river?
Yeah, like she was like they awkwardly sort of made a U-turn, like didn't want to touch Midvale at all.
Yeah, that's common.
Okay, she thought it was funny more than anything. Like, oh, we're not going to help. We're not going to drive an extra, 100 yards to a better place to turn around. We are going to flip around right here.
I think I've probably covered it all. Are there further questions or comments or feedback or suggestions?
I had one question, Glenn, and it was what I had texted you last night, that area behind Winco.
Oh, yes.
The townhomes back there. There's just, I think, 2 streets that, it's like a private street, then it's a public street, then it's private.
There's one public street that loops
Yeah.
through all the private.
Presidio and
Yep.
Suzanne, I believe. Was that just a
That was
new driver didn't realize that it intertwined
Yep.
that way? Okay. Because it hadn't happened before, so I was a
won't
little
say.
surprised.
Um,
But I know there's
some
a couple
lessons
of those
learned there, but-
communities now with that same kind of setup. So I guess, not a complaint. I think you guys did a great job, considering all of the extenuating circumstances, not the least of which being it was a holiday. And so any work that was done by your folks who came in from their warm holiday homes to clear snow, I think was great, and we appreciate it. Just as you said, there are every time something like this happens, you use that data to do better
Yeah.
next time, and I'm
And-
sure that that's what will happen.
Yeah, and these storms are all so very different and fluid. I mean, you can see 12 inches falls in Riverton and 3 here. We can get that within this city too, 13 inches up there and 4 inches here. And so we're constantly playing the bounce around
Yeah,
game.
and I was watching the trucks on Bingham Junction. They were doing a good job of keeping it clear, but then, within an hour at the most is well, they may as well not even have come.
Right,
'Cause now it needs to
and
be
that was
done.
the first day, just keeping up
Yeah.
on those mains.
So I know it's frustrating for residents. I'm sure it's frustrating for you and your crew, but I think for the most part, we were a patient enough community this
Agreed.
time.
Agreed.
But we can always do better.
Agreed.
Glenn, I'd like to thank you also. I waited a day and a half to get my street cleared,
I know you did.
and, which was fine. My point is I hope our citizens will be patient.
Me too.
I know, I just plowed the front of my businesses and my own house, and it took me 6 hours because it just kept coming down, coming down, coming down. So even though your plows went through,
They went through multiple times.
you had to
multiple
keep
times,
going and
multiple
going and
times.
going, where normally we don't have to do that. So
Yeah.
I just want our citizens to be patient.
Thank you. And it is in our plan to vary where you start in your route, so hopefully they'll bump yours up. So you're not last next
Right.
time.
It's fine.
I'll just say that I was really happy. I had somebody reach out to me thanking because their car got stuck. I'm unsure of exactly where, but some of our plow drivers were going by and stopped and helped dig them out. And the woman that this happened to reached out to me and just said how thankful she was that our drivers did that. And I do think that that's really important. And I know it's something that I hear Matt talk about a lot, is just anytime as employees of this city that if we're out and about, we see something that isn't right, making sure that we make it right. And I think that was a perfect example of they could have chosen to just keep driving
on
by,
going,
and they didn't. They got out and they helped her. And so I just want to thank them for that as well.
Thanks for sharing that. They are. They're really good dudes. They're not trying to put snow in front of people's driveways. Okay, just for the record.
I don't think any of us up here blame Public Works when snow gets
Yeah,
rolled
I'm just
into-
trying to get a message
Yeah.
out. Thanks.
Okay. Yep. Thanks, Glenn. All right. That is the end of my report. I will pass it over to Councilmember Sperry.
Well, thanks, Mayor and Glenn. I mean, my comments were really just going to be, again, thanks to Public Works. We know you've been spending a lot of time here already in the new year. And echo, be patient. I mean, I know for people out there, council members do not get any, preferential treatment, right? I mean, I don't know, maybe the other way around. We're intentionally being left for last. I don't know. But I know that was, and I feel it, people get stuck and feel like, hey, we have to go out and help them get moved, and, everybody chips in. So, be patient. It's, we don't get a lot of those storms anymore. So it's good when we get them. We need the water, but other problems come with it. And so thanks for looking at that, ways we can improve and address those issues, and just for our residents for being patient and chipping in when you can to help others out. That's it.
Thank you. Councilmember Gettle?
Thanks, Mayor. I wanted to say Happy New Year to everyone. And I also wanted to thank not only Public Works, but also our UPD folks who often are out in the snow as well, sometimes following behind the Public Works folks. So you guys work in tandem. I think for every bad story we heard, there was also some good stories. So I think with a storm like this that's so unusual, that's, if you can at least break even with the number of bad versus good stories. I think that's a win. Where I come from, which is, Utah is a winter state that has, is known for winter sports. So you think folks who live here might be a little more patient. Where I came from, we got feet of snow at a time, and, you just didn't go anywhere for 5 days, 6 days, 7 days. Seems like here people, even despite a snowstorm that happens of this magnitude every decade, they're like, well, I have to go somewhere. I'm like, well, no, you don't. There are emergencies, of course, where people have to go somewhere, but generally you don't. So I would, again, caution and ask for some more patience the next go around. And I know Glenn is hoping that that might be next year or the following year, but yeah, I don't think we want to hear about this. We know the salt budget. You need more money for salt. Yeah. We get it. Other than that, I do, this RV thing that I mentioned earlier today, it's actually interesting because I don't know that I necessarily share Ashley's sentiment, and I would consider her a friend of mine, and I appreciate anyone speaking out about something they feel strongly about in the city. I would actually take the opposite approach and think that we could do more to kind of crack down on the overnight parking of large vehicles that's happening, particularly on Center Street, 78th, and Bingham Junction. We have tractor and trailers that are parked on Bingham Junction sometimes for 3 or 4 days at a time, and I'm sure that they didn't help this snowstorm either, because I could see 3 or 4 of them outside my window parked there and just continuing to get buried by more and more snow. So I'm sure a large vehicle like that on the side of a major road is not very helpful for our Public Works folks. I know it's probably difficult to ticket them as well, because for one, it's a large vehicle, so I don't know. We're not going to tow it. So I don't know. I think there's just something, we've kind of had a discussion among the council before about this, and it didn't really go anywhere. I think just we had other more important topics, but I think that's something we might look into in the new year and think about, like having an outright ban on overnight parking of, especially vehicles of a certain weight class or a class of vehicle. I know like these small kind of family RVs might not be ones that we want to like target, but these large commercial vehicles that are for sure impeding the work of Public Works and UPD are something that I think we should look into regulating a little bit better than we do now. So that's all I have for tonight, Mayor. Thank you.
Mayor, can I add one more thing? Given
for it.
Councilmember Gettle's comments, I think it's important to remember that we just changed our winter parking ordinance 2-3 years ago or something.
To be more lenient.
Yeah, to be more lenient. Before it was November 1st through March, I think.
Yeah.
There was no on-street parking. So now we've made it so they can, except for when there's those certain snowstorms. So
with that, I was surprised to learn, and I thought that we had addressed it when we did the winter parking, but the ordinance that we have now states that these certain types of vehicles, RVs included, tractor trailers, they can't be parked overnight anywhere on a city street between 1 and 6 a.m., which I thought that we had addressed that with the winter parking, and we said only during a snow event. But the ordinance that we have now does state that any vehicle from 1 to 6 that's a certain class could be ticketed or issued a warning or towed, I guess. But, that's either something we need to expand on or get rid of some of the vehicles that are on there, like your standard, some people just have a truck with like a camper on the back of it. I don't know if that's something we need to worry about too much, but, we have some kind of conflicting ordinances that I think are causing some confusion among folks that we can shore up a bit.
Also, I'll just add that because you brought up UPD, Chief Thomas, to steal some of your thunder, he in a conversation with Matt and I, he did mention that officers who were working during the snowstorm did make comments about how well cleared the roads were and how that was such a benefit to officers. So, thanks again. All right, Councilmember Brown.
You have a handful of things. I know my neighborhood would not prefer to remove the overnight ban for those types of vehicles. I know we've had some illicit activity in one or two in my neighborhood that, the owner of the camper didn't live in our neighborhood, parked it, and the chief had to come remove it, and he said it was pretty rough. So it's a tool for safety reasons a lot of times, and so, I feel for the person, but there's a lot of other reasons why we would have that ordinance other than just, public works, which I appreciate, but that's more of like a year-round thing opposed to just snow events. So I don't know if I had the appetite to change it. I would even make it maybe a little more strict, just to, at least the people in my area probably prefer that.
And for the record, so would I.
Yeah,
I think it should be stricter.
Sandy's council sent us a nice Christmas and holiday season card. I think we should do the same to the 4 neighboring cities next year, that we touch with, even if we refuse to plow a centimeter into West Jordan, we should still, I like it. I think it's a nice touch. Out all the Christmas cards. That was the first one. I was like, oh, that was nice, Sandy. So I don't know if we can look into it. It's not that many cards,
We'll do it.
Okay, cool.
2 of them here.
A few items about the snow event I want to discuss that weren't necessarily directly related to Glenn, but one thing that has worried me since I've been on council, and the idea of you create something like Bingham Junction Boulevard that gets a ton of attention, right? They have to continually go, right? And you have people that have owned homes in my neighborhood since the 60s that go, here's this new road that I've been paying taxes in the city since the 60s. Here's this new road that just continually gets plowed, right? It's a lot of commercial over there, whatever. Like, my road isn't done. I don't even know if Altaview is totally done in my area, right? And we try to tell them to be patient, but they can see plows just continually going up and down a street that's brand new. I feel for them in the sense that they sort of feel a little bit cheated. That's like, hey, I don't know if it's paying for, if it's great that we provided a lot of stuff from a macro view, but I don't know from a micro view as individual citizens if they all necessarily agree that the services are the same that it was before. And it would be easier if they were all residential roads that got the same sort of pass treatment, because you could say, hey, the homes there are paying for their fair share. So I don't know if that means we need another plow, is what I'm getting at, right? We should try to match the services that people are used to in timing. And it's unfortunate if we have to raise taxes to do that, because the idea with development is they should be paying for their new, so people aren't all of a sudden hung with a higher cost. But that's one thing that I've heard, in frustration. But that's not on Public Works. That's not their fault. They have to clear Bingham Junction like they do in any other main road. That's why I didn't bring it up in your part. And the other thing, and another great example, I'd like to thank the chief for going over to Millennium Way today, because that one, that's like a massive safety hazard. I don't know if your trucks have been down there. They're buried. All those cars are buried on Millennial Way that just park for MOTA. They don't seem to care, right? And the same thing with the town home apartments. I remember, it was one of the first things I voted on. I said, I distinctly said, there is nowhere for them to put snow. The only thing they can do is push it out into our road. And the developer who's not here at the time, or the city planner that's not here at the time said that's illegal. They're not allowed to do it. I think Kane said, they have to remove the snow. And Hooper Nolte, the developer, raised his right hand and essentially said, like, we will not do that, right? And now there's like a car-size ice ball that is on someone's property blocking their gate, essentially, right? That they've pushed snow they did exactly what I said. I'm like, the only thing they're going to do is push. And what I struggle with is citizens are not supposed to do that, right? They're not supposed to push snow into the road. A lot of citizens don't know that, right? So even if it's a legal requirement, I know ignorance of the law is not, an excuse, but there's a moral component here where they said they wouldn't do it, right? So not only are they not allowed to do it, I brought this up every single year where I said, they're pushing. It's right on the mouth of Center and Roosevelt. But this snow has, like you said, 50% more water. So it's like an ice ball the size of a Civic that goes from the guy's fence to about 3 or 4 feet into the road. And I hate the response, we'll talk to him. Like, we are way past talking to them. Like, if they can't be fined some substantial amount for this, where they will feel it to remove the snow off the property or put it on their dog poo infested gravel pit that they have made, then we need to rewrite our code, because that entrance is a really, like, out of everywhere to do it, it's really dangerous. It's right on the entrance of a road. So if someone came around the corner too fast, they would just slam into it. And then I don't know who's at fault. It's a public road.
Yeah, that's a good point. Garrett, can you help refresh my memory? Because I know we've reviewed this code recently, and I can't remember what's new and what's in it existing, but I believe this instance should be covered there. Can't block any public right of way, and it makes a list, debris, things like that, right? My suggestion is to probably have Officer Utley look at the code and then go out there and have some discussions.
And that's what we do. Yeah, I understand Brian's frustration. You're right, because that's what we have been doing.
Oh, he has been doing that.
Not this year, but we've had several people go.
What teeth do we have in the code, Garrett?
We
Infraction?
We go through our code enforcement process. So
What's the misdemeanor infraction?
Is it a fine? Like, what is it? You just put a lien on their property that they don't care about?
I'm just wondering if we've escalated it as far as we can, or if there's another level.
That I don't know right off.
Since we're putting you on the spot, if we need to come back or to follow up at another time.
so that specific code section I would need to look up. Generally, though, any sort of violation of this nature goes through our code enforcement process, which is a civil process. So it results in fines of generally somewhere between $30 and $60 a day for them being in violation until they clear up the issue or they hit their maximum fine. Generally, we don't go criminally after, especially an HOA, because
it's technically rental, so there's not necessarily an HOA, right?
or a property management company. I mean, we can under the law, but it's one of those things of, does it get us any closer to compliance by charging an entity that has no risk of jail time, no risk of anything, with a Class B misdemeanor versus, potentially charging them up to $1,500 in fines if they don't come into compliance.
Yeah, I mean, there's no like repeat offender escalator or anything?
It doubles the fines.
Yeah, I mean, this is a townhome place that charges like $2,500 to $3,000. Like, they're not really providing a great benefit to Midvale anyways, right? The housing cost is ridiculous, so they're doubling up, And you should drive by it. It's not like hey, people are like being unreasonable. It's literally like, have you seen it yet?
I haven't, but I don't know if this is the time for this question or not, but Garrett, does the city have the authority to move it off the road and back out onto their property?
Let's discuss that at a,
Yeah, I was gonna say,
later point.
how about Garrett reviews the, I mean, you gotta, instead of off the cuff, let's review the code and see what our options are. I mean, I have plenty of clients that they don't get to push it out on the street. They have to, they decided they're pushing it into a parking stall that nobody gets to use, or if they need that parking stall, they then pay somebody, they load it up and they haul it off site. I mean, and that's, if that's what they have to do, they're gonna.
of people doing that today.
Yeah.
Mostly businesses.
But they're gonna, I mean, they'll have to, it's an expense they're gonna have to incur, so.
They have a spot for it. I don't know if they can get it to it. Like I said, there's that drainage thing that they could easily fill up with lots of snow if they so choose to. But they might have to redesign their, like make a gate or something into it. But anyways, out of all of them, that one's the most frustrating because it's very dangerous. It's not just like, hey, it's unsightly or we just don't like it because it's, townhomes. It's like a cement, or it's like a ice cube the size of a car just sitting there. That's all I have.
Thanks, Brent. Councilmember Robinson?
Thanks, Mayor. First, I wanted to say thank you to UFA for showing us their amazing new firehouse. That was extremely interesting, and I really appreciated that. And then also as well express my gratitude to Public Works and UPD for all the work they did through the storm. I know it's tough. And to also encourage the residents, I know sometimes it can be hard, but let's do our best to get off the road so the plows can have the room. I'm on a very thin road, and unfortunately we had a lot of cars on there, so I think the plows had some pretty serious issues getting through, especially Sunday night. So just a gentle reminder to do what we can. That's all I have.
Sorry, I just need to add to that because I forgot to say this. If you could communicate, and Laura might be throwing it out there as well, but the windrows are getting quite tall. Kids are playing behind them and jumping out, and we've had a few close calls. So if you could spread that message as well, I would appreciate that.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Glover?
I'd like to thank for the snow, for our water, but mostly for me selling snowblowers. It's been great. Also, like to thank the fire. It was great to go to your open house. What a nice new station we have. Something we can very well be proud of. And I hope everyone has a great new year. That's all, Mayor.
Okay, thank you. Matt, for the city manager report.
Happy New Year. We've got a lot of big things that I think we'll be addressing in the next year. Most of them will be coming up because really, we've already been talking about budget, but really that begins in earnest now. And so I look forward to working on a variety of projects that many of you brought up over the course of the last year that we need to get into the next year's budget. So that should be exciting. Now, speaking of budget though, Mariah did want to talk to you guys about a change in how we address some of our budget amendment type issues. Budget amendments.
Yeah, just when I presented budget amendment, it seems like historically what has happened is the budgets amendments or budgets are brought to you as a discussion item initially, and then we have a public hearing. And because it makes sense to me, and Councilmember Gettle requested that we do a full presentation during a public hearing, then I'm doing a full presentation twice. And I was wondering how you guys would feel about having the first time the budget amendment or tentative budget is presented in a public hearing, and then we would bring it back to you as an action item in a following, taking your feedback or whatever, and having it as an action item in the following meeting. So instead of a discussion item and then public hearing and action, doing a public hearing and then an action item in a following meeting.
That sounds good to me. It sounds
Me as
much
well.
better.
Everyone think that will be okay? Okay, great. Thank you.
Thanks.
And with that, I'm done.
Thanks, Matt. Had to tap him on the elbow there to remind him that he was still
Heidi's
up.
telling me my thumbs up doesn't count, so I say yes. She's told me it has to be verbal.
All right, moving on to the consent agenda of the night. We've got, two items. Consider minutes of December 6, 2022. And then consider resolution number 2022 R01 approving the Ninth Amendment to the Cooperative Agreement by public agencies to create a new entity to consolidate law enforcement services and provide rules of governance. Matt, did you want to add anything back to that? If you remember, we presented that Ninth Amendment to the interlocal agreement of the Unified Police at our last meeting.
No, nothing. It's what we discussed prior. Nothing has changed from what we discussed, and it is implementing one of the policies that we had asked them to incorporate.
With that, I'd ask for a motion.
Mayor, a motion that we approve the consent agenda?
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any discussion on that? Rory, will you call roll?
Yes, Councilmember Sperry.
Aye.
Glover.
Aye.
Robinson.
Aye.
Brown.
Yes.
And Gettle.
Yes.
Okay, that carries. Thank you. Moving on to our first action item of the night, discuss and consider resolution number 2023-R02, acknowledging completion and receipt of fiscal year 2022 annual audit. All right.
Okay. This was much smoother than last year for me on this because I was actually here for the fiscal year in which we were being audited for. And so I just want to say, though, a big thank you to my finance team, as always. They are always helping me, and to John and the Larson & Company, because they have been wonderful to work with. The annual comprehensive financial report is a 135 dense financial document, but the requirements that make up the annual comprehensive financial report that come from the GFOA are meant to make it more accessible. I don't know that that's always true, but that's kind of the gist of what we're trying to do. So I'm just going to quickly do an overview of what the ACFR is comprised of, and then do a quick overview of our fund's financial standings as of June 30th, 2022, and then I'm going to turn the time over to John for a formal presentation of the audit, just so you know where we're going. So these are the sections of the ACFR. We have an introduction, financials, basic financial statements, required supplementary information, and a statistical section. So the introductory section includes a transmittal letter that is kind of a management letter to the community. It has audit requirements, introduces our auditors, has a profile of Midvale, factors affecting our financial condition, and a long-term financial planning section. It has our certificate of achievement for our previous fiscal year, which we were awarded for fiscal year 21, I think in mid-December. So that was new that we were awarded that for last year. It has an organizational chart and an overview of our elected and appointed officials. In the financial section, we have our independent auditor's report, and then the management's discussion and analysis, which is what is in the MD&A is specified by the GFOA. They say what exactly can be included in there. It's meant to be an objective, easily readable analysis of the government's finances. Again, I don't know that it's accessible to everyone, but we're trying to. It has summaries of the different funds, significant events and changes, and financial highlights. For our basic financial statements, this is what the state requires of us. We have government-wide financial statements, governmental fund financial statements, proprietary fund financial statements, and then notes to the financial statements. The notes to the financial statements are the bulk of the ACFR. It's an in-depth explanation of the financial statements. It includes a significant our significant accounting policies, a reconciliation of our government-wide statements to fund statements, a summary of our deposits and investments, a summary of our capital asset information and debt, and then also information on our pension plan. The required supplementary information is just additional pension disclosures that we get from URS. In the supplementary information, we have our non-major proprietary fund, so that is our enterprise funds, stormwater, sanitation, telecom, those, and those same statements that we have for the government funds, we get those for the proprietary funds here. And then the statistical section includes historical data, operational and economic, that's 10 years, so financial trends, revenue capacity, debt capacity, demographic and economic information, and operating information. So that's what's in the ACFR, and now I'm going to give you fund overviews, because if you want more information on that stuff, then you can read the ACFR, because we spent a lot of time putting it together. Oh, and then there's the internal control and compliance reports from the auditor as well at the very end. Okay, so in our general fund, for the fiscal year '22, our revenues exceeded expenditures by $840,000. Our revenues, mainly our taxes, came in $1.5 million over what was budgeted, and our expenditures $1.3 million under budget. All departments were under budget in the general fund, and then we had $3.2 million in transfers. That's moving our ARPA money into the water fund, charges from our internal services, and transfers to our capital projects fund. So it looks like we have a very large general fund balance, but as I was looking through this today and reconciling, 35% is the maximum that the state allows. However, I believe it was with Kyle that you guys set the policy. You started at a 15% fund balance that you wanted to get at, and then increase that 3% per year. So we are over that in fiscal year '22. We're at the 35%, but when you take into account what you have already appropriated in a fiscal year '23 budget, that puts us at 27%, or just off over by $90,000, which is what your goal would be to be in fiscal year '23, is at 27%.
And Glenn wants $90,000 worth of salt, so.
Yeah, I'm sure we can find somewhere to put $90,000. In the RDA, their expenditures exceeded revenues by $2.3 million, increasing their total fund balance. This is for all our 5 RDA funds to $12.7 million. They had a 2% increase in property tax revenues to $8.8 million, and spent $2.8 million on redevelopment expenditures. In capital projects, our expenditures, I don't think that's right. I think our revenues exceeded our expenditures by $2.5 million. So that increased our fund balance to about 4.3, but again, with money that was appropriated in fiscal year '23, our fund balance will be at 1.7 estimated. In the water fund, we look at the enterprise funds a little bit differently. It is still fund balance, but we're only looking at current assets less current liabilities, and then we can look at that. And I think the same time you made your fund balance percentage goals, you made goals on having number of working days of capital with Kyle. So in the water fund, this fund balance had a decrease. As far as I can tell, this is just because of the significant increase in operating costs. And so when we're looking at the number of days of working capital, that's looking at the operating costs for that year. And in fiscal year '22, they were higher than they were in '21. And I think we'll see that same trend in '23 as well. So we did have a decrease in the number of days of working capital we have on hand. In the sewer fund, interestingly, again, and this is why this is a weird trend, we actually had an increase in fund balance, but a decrease in the number of days of working capital, again, I think because of the significant increase in operating costs. In the stormwater fund, we had an increase in available working capital, so now we are over our goal as we were last year. The street lighting fund had an increase. Actually, both the street light and the sanitation fund had an increase in working capital, days of working capital. Our internal service funds, our fleet department, both of these funds exist because we assess user charges to every fund and department, including for capital replacement charges. So the fleet had an increase in their fund balance, but don't you worry, Glenn's going to use that because all his vehicles are like twice as much as we were planning for them to be. And then information technology this year had a slight decrease in their fund balance. Any questions? Okay, I'm going to turn the time over to John then.
Thanks, Mariah. And if you'll just state your first and last name, so we make sure we've got that.
I'm John Hatterley. I'm a partner at Larson & Company. We're here just to report that we have finalized the audit for Midvale City for the year ended June 30th, 2022, like Mariah stated. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on the financial data because Mariah went through a lot of it. So I'm going to go through our opinions that we give, what falls under the opinion, what does not fall under the opinion, and then just some things that we're required to communicate to you as a council. So in the audit report that Mariah talked about, that's page 10 and 11 of the annual financial report. It did change formats this year. We had standards that came out that kind of changed the way audit reports are issued, and that is for every entity type, not just governments. So if you're involved in other entities where you see audit reports, now the audit opinion is in the first section. Our opinion on the financial statements is an unmodified or an unqualified opinion. The basis for our opinion, we have to follow certain standards, both generally accepted auditing standards as well as government auditing standards. So that's where we derive our guidance on how we perform our audits. The responsibilities of the city, these are your financial statements. This is your annual financial report. You are required to know and understand the accounting principles. That onus is on Christian and Mariah and their staff. One additional thing that is now included in the audit report is if in the normal course of your financial staff doing in their normal course of business or in preparing the annual financial report, if there are conditions or events that arise that prevent you from continuing as a going concern or have the potential to prohibit you, then you have to do an internal analysis to identify what the events are. Are they overcomable? Do you have to, go out and change the way you're doing things, discontinue some services in order to continue to operate beyond a 12-month period? This kind of came about because of COVID. I hate that we go back to COVID is the new timeline, I think. Everybody reverts back to when we went to COVID, but that's really why this came out, because when COVID happened, obviously in the public sector, if everybody shuts down, businesses cannot make money, therefore potentially they're gonna shut down business, which happened quite a bit. We were actually very blessed in the state of Utah that didn't happen as much as other parts of the country, but it affects governments as well. If people are not making money, if businesses are not operating, you do not get sales tax revenue. People have a hard time paying their property taxes, so inadvertently it does affect the government. The reason why this came about was nobody really assessed how COVID was going to affect their business, and so they were going out and getting loans, things like that, and then all of a sudden they weren't able to pay that back. They went out of business. Lenders lost money. So as a potential disclosure in the financial statements, if there are conditions or events that arise during the year, you just have to do an analysis to make sure that you can continue to operate and provide the services that the city needs to provide. Our responsibilities, this is also a new section in the audit report, not new to us, but new to communicating in the audit report. We have to exercise professional judgment and professional skepticism. I explain that to my guys as we trust but verify. So we feel like you're doing a good job. We know you want to do what's right. Our job is to come in and verify what you're doing. We have to identify the risk of material misstatement, and we'll talk a little bit about significant risks in a second. We look at your internal controls. We don't give an opinion on your internal controls, but we do make sure that A, they're in place, and B, that they're functioning. It's pretty hard to have a safe environment when you don't have controls that are in place and operating. We look at the way you implement and address accounting principles, especially new ones that are coming out, to make sure that they're appropriate, that they're in line with GAAP and guidance. And then our last bullet point as well is that we have to, in our test work, look for conditions or events that would prevent you from continuing as a going concern for the next at least 12 months. So we also have that responsibility. And also as part of the audit report, it is now in the audit report that we have to be independent of Midvale City, and that onus of responsibility is on me as the partner. That's not on Mariah or her staff to make sure that we remain independent, that we're not doing things that we shouldn't be. I, as the partner, that's my responsibility, not only for my team, but my entire firm has to be independent of Midvale City. All right, certain sections of the financial statements that don't fall under our opinion, that's the required supplementary information that Mariah talked about. That's the management's discussion and analysis that always follows the audit report. And then after the notes, there's a section called required supplementary information. Just be aware that those are not audited sections and they do not fall under our opinion. However, the MD&A, like Mariah said, that's the kind of the Reader's Digest version of what's contained in the financial statements. So that's a great place to start to read if you want to know kind of where the city is compared to last year. A lot of information on your debt, on your capital assets. So kind of a brief overview of the financial statements. The supplementary information that Mariah talked about, which is your non-major funds, those are included with the basic financial statements to provide additional analysis. That does fall under our opinion because they have their own column in the basic financial statements. It's just that they're all summarized into one column. So that is covered under our opinion, which is, again, unmodified or an unqualified opinion. The other information in the audit report is the introductory section and the statistical sections. Those do not fall under our opinion. However, we are now required to read and make sure that all of that information is materially correct to what is contained in the financial statements. So that's kind of the onus of our audit right there. So, all right, a couple other reports that we're required to go over. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on the government auditing standards report. This is a report that we issued that just states that we've done our audit in accordance with government auditing standards. There are certain different requirements that we perform in an audit of a city or a county or government entity than we do in a for-profit or nonprofit business. One of those things is to look for material weaknesses or significant deficiencies. We did not identify any, so I won't spend any more time on that. The next report is the report that we issue to the state auditor that lets them know that we've looked at their required compliance sections that they issue every year. We do give an opinion on your compliance with state compliance, and that is also an unmodified or an unqualified opinion. I do have to throw the caveat in there that our opinion is very specific to the areas that they request that we look at. We don't look at every area of Utah code and give it a compliance on it. That would be very time consuming. However, there are a lot of things that the state auditor doesn't require us to look at that we do build into our audit to make sure that you are in compliance. Things that I feel like are more pertinent to the financial report, like the 3-day deposit rule. I think that's one of the most critical ones to making sure that when money comes to the city that it's actually making it to the bank within 3 days, daily if possible, is what I like to see. Let's see, so that's all on the annual financial report. Now communication, and the reason why this is a separate letter and why you got it separate is this is really communication that is just for you as a council at the close of our audit. Our responsibility in relation to the financial statement audit, all of that was laid out in the engagement letter. We have an engagement letter signed at the beginning of our audit. And that also includes our plan scoping, scope and timing of the audit, when we're going to perform field work, when we're going to issue reports, things of that nature. Compliance with ethics requirements and independence. I've already talked to you about independence. It's my job to make sure that we're independent and also that we're following our ethical requirements. Significant risks identified. So I said that we were going to talk about significant risks, and this is a new communication now. Not that we haven't always done it, but we are now required to communicate to you as a council the significant risks that we identified as part of our audit. And to kind of preclude that, all of our audits are performed on a risk basis. That means that we break down the audit into either significant financial statement areas like cash, revenue, capital assets, long-term debt, payroll, things like that. But we also look at related parties. We look at significant estimates. We look at journal entries. So anything that potentially could affect the financial statements. And then we assign risk based on those areas, by their very nature. So cash, by its nature, is high risk, right? Cash is easy to take or to commit fraud. Capital assets, typically has a lower risk because it's really hard to steal a snowplow, right? If you lose a snowplow, I'm pretty sure you're going to notice the next day that it's gone, and it's going to be probably pretty easy to find. So typically lower risk. So every area is assigned a risk. So as we start to plan the audit, we identify risk associated, with the financial statement balance and by its nature. But there are overarching risks that we have to address specifically, and those are improper revenue recognition. So these are areas where fraud typically happens. So revenue is the number one place where fraud happens. So in every engagement, whether it's government, public, for-profit, revenue recognition is always going to be a significant risk. Cash disbursements, because you're a government, you're dealing with public funds, you need to make sure that those public funds are spent appropriately and that they're not misappropriated. So cash disbursements is another significant risk. And then potential management bias, financial statement estimates, and the ability to override controls. So these three risks, we have to plan and perform specific tests to address these risks to make sure that there aren't any misstatements in the financial statements caused by these significant risks. So the city itself didn't do anything to warrant these significant risks. These are just overarching risks that are significant to your financial statements that we plan and perform specific tests around to make sure that there's not any errors in the financial statements caused by these. All right, significant accounting estimates, like I said, that's actually one of the significant risks. Our job is to make sure that your estimates are consistent over time and that they're reasonable. Capital assets, the way you depreciate your assets, allowance for doubtful accounts in your utility funds, all of those are estimates. We have to make sure that they're reasonable and consistent. And the reason why is if, as a council, you're trying to plan for future expenditures and you look historical, maybe over the last 4 or 5 years, and because you're changing estimates or you can manipulate your financial data, it's really hard to plan for the future if you don't have good consistent data to rely on in the past few years. Another one that's really that's built into the financial statements is the Utah retirement system. That is something that you do not have control over. Mariah doesn't have control over it. They issue a report at the end of the year. They send journal entries and say, Mariah, these are the journal entries. These are the balances of your net pension liability, your net pension assets, deferred inflows and outflows. It is a significant estimate, and it does affect your financial data. One of the things I will consult you on is as you are looking, especially in your utility funds, planning expenditures, when you're looking at fund statements, is to back anything that has to do with the URS out of those statements so that you get a true picture of really where that fund is. I'll give you a good example. So last year, there was quite a large net pension liability. So you have large liability on your books because of the URS. Well, that's only going to be a liability if everybody in the Utah retirement system decides next week that they're going to retire and we have to fully fund everybody's retirement. That's the city's portion that now you're responsible to pay for. Is that ever going to come to fruition? Probably not. I mean, that's the URS's responsibility, is to make sure that they're investing money appropriately, they're collecting the right amount, percentage off of everybody's paychecks to be able to fully fund everybody's pension. This year, because of the markets last year, that liability was eradicated, and now you have a net pension asset. So it moved from a liability section, now you have assets. Well, what that did to your bottom line and your expenditures, it decreased your expenditures, or depending how you showed it, it was either a revenue or a decrease in expenditures. That makes each one of those utility funds have a better bottom line than it did the year before, and that was strictly just because of journal entries that were put into the books. It wasn't a true cash, influx of cash or decrease in cash. The way the markets are going now and the predictions for 2023, I would assume that you're going to have a liability next year. That means that you're going to take a hit in every one of those funds. So that's why I recommend, if you're looking at budgeting and planning for those things, that you back out anything related to the Utah retirement systems. And Mariah can do that before she gives you the numbers. All right, uncorrected and corrected misstatements. There weren't any misstatements that were not corrected. Disagreements with management. For purposes of our report, there weren't any disagreements with management that we're required to communicate. And then management representations, we get a representation letter signed by Mariah and her team. And I believe one of the council members, I can't remember who signed it. Mayor. Really, it's a full disclosure letter that you've been forthcoming with any information, that you're not withholding any information that potentially could affect your financial statements or the opinion. All right, last but not least, the findings for the year. That's what you guys were all excited about. sorry to break your heart, you're not going to be very excited because there's no findings. So there weren't any internal control findings, and there were no state compliance findings. We do talk to Mariah and her team about things that come up during the audit that really don't warrant findings. And we really try to be that resource that they can rely on to have best practices in their office. And that's one of the things that we talked about in the audit committee meeting, was just some things that they could do to kind of take that department and make it their own, now that Mariah and Christian have both been here almost a full year, and Mariah a little bit over a full year, and really make it their own. So make their policies and procedures tailored to their skill sets and what their strengths and weaknesses are, and make sure that the controls are in place to mitigate any weaknesses. So that's all I had. I don't know if anybody has any questions. Okay.
Not saying any. Thanks so much.
Thanks.
All right.
Mayor, I move that we approve Resolution 2023 R02 acknowledging completion of the fiscal year 2022 audit, and direct that notice be published pursuant to Section 10-6-152 of the Utah Code.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion on that?
Just want to thank Mariah and Christian for what they're doing. With the audit committee, we got glowing praise for them, so we feel that they're doing really good.
Yes, thank you.
I think it's the first time we haven't had some sort of finding to discuss, so congrats on that.
Okay. Seeing no other discussion, Rory, will you call roll?
Yes, Councilmember Glover.
Aye.
Robinson.
Yes.
Brown.
Yes.
Gettle.
Yes.
And Sperry.
Aye.
Okay, that carries. Thank you. Moving on to our second action item, consider resolution number 2023 R03, approving franchise telecommunications agreement with Communications America LLC. Nate.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. This is a quick one. This is as utilities come into the city, then the city requires a franchise agreement for use of the city right-of-way. The Teleport Communications America filed for a franchise agreement. Going through that, we put together the same contract that has been used in the last several years for all the utilities. They had no changes to that, so they were good with all of those requirements. And so the staff is recommending approving the franchise agreement. Just one note on this. In the contract, which is attached, it's correct where it says Teleport Communications America LLC. In the staff report and the ordinance, I left off Teleport in there, but I did it consistently. But if you, as you make this motion, make a note that we are approving it for Teleport Communications America LLC. But if there's any questions about franchise agreement, I'd be happy to answer those.
Any questions, comments for Nate?
So this one's for fiber. The other ones, were the others for fiber? I think
There's
they were
different
other-
ones. Some of them
Yeah.
are for fiber, some of them for different communication equipment. This one, just so you're aware, this is fiber, but it's not a new provider or anything. This is just a subsidiary of AT&T that basically handles their infrastructure. So nothing new here.
And you need us to suspend the rules?
Yeah, so if you would suspend the rules and approve this resolution, if council would like.
Is this in regards to the fiber cables that were run? And this is finishing the project?
No, these are new fiber cables that they want to do for their system, for the current system in there. There's just places where they're replacing.
Well, so like in my backyard, they ran, AT&T ran cable and then put the temporary sort of clips on the cables that have all sort of fallen off. In a snowstorm, they're all dangling to my fence line. And it's like all over backyard. So it's like AT&T started a fiber project, 6 months ago, but this snowstorm has made it bad. So if it's somehow the same company, we should let them know that there is an underlying issue in Midvale with AT&T fiber currently.
Okay, we could make a note of that. When
If it's a subsidiary, they might not be related. That's why I was asking.
They, whenever I communicate with them, then some of them are AT&T emails, some of them are this company. So I think they're just very intermixed. So I think if I talk to them about that, I might be able to get some clarification from them on that.
Yeah, they just got to tighten it back up, and I think they're waiting for people to. Well, we still can't sign up even though fiber's there, but it's making it hang. The snow made all the clips kind of move to one side, and then they sag down really low.
Okay, I'll ask if they're part of that follow-up.
Okay, with that, I'd entertain a motion.
Mayor, I move that we suspend the rules and approve resolution number 2023R03, authorizing the mayor to execute a telecommunications services franchise agreement with Teleport Communications America LLC.
Second, but I have a question. It couldn't possibly be R03, right? Because can it be the third resolution of the year?
Yeah, consent agreement and then the fiscal year audit.
Oh, the consent agreement
So-
counts as one?
There was one in there, yeah.
And sometimes we do, that is the situation. But sometimes if we make adjustments to the agenda at some point,
Like out of order?
they might end up
Okay.
out of order too.
I just had that question, but second.
Can I ask that we amend the motion? So, can we approve an amended resolution since the resolution does not have the correct name in it? To just make sure that the final resolution matches that name?
You want me to put that in my amended motion? I'll do it.
Is that okay?
Yeah. So we need to first amend the motion? Amend the resolution? And then do this? Okay. So I move that we amend the resolution to have it be with Teleport Communications America LLC. You want to vote separately on that, or let me just keep going?
I think if you want to combine it,
All
that's
right,
fine.
I'll start over then.
Sorry.
I move that we amend resolution number 2023R03 so that the agreement is with Teleport Communications America LLC. And I further move that we suspend the rules and approve resolution number 2023R03 as amended, authorizing the mayor to execute a telecommunications service franchise agreement with Teleport Communications America LLC.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion on that? All right, Rory, will you call roll?
Yes. Councilmember Robinson?
Yes.
Brown?
Yes.
Gettle?
Yes.
Sperry?
Aye.
And Glover?
Aye.
Okay, that carries. Thank you. All right, moving on to item C, even though it says D on the agenda. Phew. Consider resolution number 2023-R04, authorizing the mayor to execute an agreement with Wasatch Front Regional Council, WFRC, for the Midvale Center and Midvale Fort Union Station area plans. Nate?
Yay. So Adam is feeling under the weather, so he wasn't able to be here today, but this is a project that Adam is leading with as the Community Development Director. This is basically identical to the agreement that was approved 4 weeks ago with WFRC to do the Bingham Junction Station Area Plan and the Gardner Village Station Area Plan. That one, different consultant, but these are for the two remaining station areas in Midvale. Same process that we went through, the same way that this will be administered. This is an agreement between the consultant and WFRC, but this is giving the city's consent to give staff time towards the process. The funding for this comes through a grant through WFRC to cover the full amount. And again, these are being done because of House Bill 462. Which calls for all the station areas to get station areas plans. We're excited about this one. These are for two station areas where we do really want to look at the zoning and the way that these are planned. We were happy to get a lot of bids on this and be able to go with MHTN, which is the same
architecture design group that has done our State Street project. This one is great because with both of the station area plans, one of them incorporates a lot of State Street. The other one comes up and incorporates, doesn't actually get to the street, but incorporates a lot of the property that's right along State Street. So very happy to have a consultant who's very familiar with the Midvale State Street doing these station area plans. Be about a 6-month process. They plan to be done end of July, start now. And another great thing about this is through working with staff on the State Street project, they really got a sense that council wanted to be involved with this. So they've have this broken into 3 phases. And with every phase, there's a step where they will come back and talk with council and get your feedback on where they are at that point in the study. So I think both of these stations are high interest areas for the council in terms of how these are developed. Another thing that we're doing with this is we're combining the concepts here with the stationary plan with the idea that the 7200 station could potentially have a high HTRZ, which is similar to an RDA, but it's a housing and transportation reinvestment zone. Something new that the state has come out with, and actually you'll hear more about this in 2 weeks at the council meeting. It's actually something that we're required to do with as an option with the affordable housing plan. The only other thing I have on this is several components of this, so it won't just be a planning exercise. It'll be planning with MHTN, which is land use planning. Horrocks is a big part of this, which is transportation planning, specifically their transportation division, and then Leland Consulting, which is economic development. So all 3 of those tie together, so we should get some good findings and some good recommendations from the project, and we're excited to move forward with it. But with that, I will entertain any questions you have.
I have a handful of thoughts since my house is almost in both of these circles. I'm not excited about this. Within 5 years, I've been on council for 5 years. We've done a station area plan in both of these areas that MODA kind of killed, right? But we got all this input. We spent money on them. So I'm unsure why we can't just, why we have to spend $160,000 more on station area plans when we had 2 station area plans. I don't think we ever adopted or approved them because MODA kind of went right in the middle of where a lot of people thought something cool would happen. That being said, the key part of that is the landowners don't have to do what the development, what our stationary plan says, right? They can sort of use it as a guideline. The outcome of that was we made a TOD and a TOD overlay within, the last 4 years or so, right? So at least 4 of us have projected on council that this is what we want for this area already. So I don't know, one, why we can't sort of repurpose something that we've already gotten a lot of community input on. It's less than 5 years old. And then 2, the outcome was we sort of voted on what we thought would work there. It's unfortunate for me, especially the center station one, because besides State Street, it's 100% 10,000 to a quarter acre lot home, single family homes. And obviously the state doesn't like that. But those homes were there a long time before the track station was there, where at least the center station, 50% of it looks to be commercial or industrial, where there could be turnover. But it's hard for me as a resident that is in the circle. I've probably seen 3 or 4 plans of tracks turning over their one parking lot into anything from 3 to 5 stories. Or the stationary plan, there's one concept, 10 stories that people liked. The outcome is just for a developer to come in and do what they want, not what our vision necessarily is. And we've already sort of told what our vision is, like with the TOD and the TO overlay. And most of the current council voted on that. It's not like a previous one where we've sort of changed over, we have new ideas. So I don't love this because I can see the outcome being, hey, you guys, where I live, I get that you guys have wanted these sort of overlays in the direction, but now we're going to make this plan, and it'll definitely benefit, future developers, and it will definitely hinder current residents. So I just don't know why we can't at least repurpose something that we already did an exercise on and spend that much money on.
Yeah, and the answer is, first of all, the state is requiring us to do it. Second of all, it is your plan. So even though the state is requiring us to do it, they don't have prescribed outcomes that have to come from these. So it still ends up being the council's plan. And third of all, we are actually not heavily using, but we are making sure that the consultants are aware of all of the past planning that has been done on those stationary plans.
So whatever happened to those two plans?
They were just they never came back to council for approval.
What would stop I just don't want to spend another 160,000 and then that process happens again, right?
This one, I mean, I guess the other good thing about this is this time you're required to adopt it, so it can't end the state. We have to say that we've adopted station area plans, whatever those end up being. I mean, they can be exactly the same as those ones before. They could have tweaks that make things better, or
Doesn't the state require a few specific things in there? So I don't know.
Probably
that it would be
density requirements or something.
they don't have density requirements. They do require things that you're supposed to evaluate in there, but they're still.
They just want to adopt a plan.
So I just want to make sure, I don't think we could just take the one that existed and just stamp it and say it's approved. We'll probably have to make modifications based off some of the requirements of the state, but it can definitely be a big basis.
Yeah, and one of the things is that it has to cover the full 1 mile radius. So those plans that we have now don't come nearly as
That
far.
one that we never approved?
Yeah, the ones that we did never approve never came that far out. They didn't cover that amount of land. They also have requirements that the transportation connectivity has a wider reach, so that it's evaluating transportation at a higher level. None of these things are bad. I think that they're good, but
I just don't want it to be like, hey, you have to put 10 stories here.
no, it doesn't have any requirements at this point.
I mean, I think we need to direct them to look at our code then, because it's, I think, relatively new, where we did the TOD overlay, because that was the whole point, was if you're going to go above 3 stories, you had to do mixed use, and there's other things. Like, we tried to make it a little more modern than just like, hey, it has to be quarter-acre lots or whatever, But I think that was our appetite.
And one of the things that I heard in the council meeting, I don't know, 6 weeks ago or so, when a developer was proposing something there, is that I heard some of the council expressing they wanted to see some things like mixed use. I think, as I've been here for 3 years now, and I've heard the council talk about planning issues, one of the directions that I kind of feel like maybe we should look at a little bit more, that this process would open up, is a lot of times you have a vision of this is the ideal of what we want there, and then you kind of include, here's the broad things, the highest of that being maybe the ideal of what we want. What I would maybe suggest is don't leave all of that open underneath to underbuild or do something that you want. If you want mixed use, let's come in there and prescribe that we want mixed use, and then figure out through the economic analysis, does that really work? What do we have to do to get that? And then, there's all sorts of tools where you say, this is what we want. We don't want a hotel to be rebuilt and repurposed when it's not giving us what we actually want. So take that off the table and just say what you want. Our economic consultants can come in and say, you're not going to get this because X, Y, and Z. And we might be able to say, well, if we gave, these, and I'm going to say density bonus, but there's all sorts of different things that you can give then do we get that? And so you start to incentivize development through your planning rather than just saying, this is what we want, but you could do anything else underneath that, which I think is what a lot of the zones are now. And I think just if council is clear what you want in a zone, let's get a little bit of options in there, but let's be more directive of this is what we want here, so this is what we're going to zone here. And we don't want these, things that are, once you build something there, it's basically there for 20 plus years. If we don't want that to happen, let's prescribe that if it is going to redevelop into what we want it to be. Right now, the state hasn't taken that authority away from you. It's basically saying, be prescriptive in your zoning and allow what you're saying to allow, but that doesn't mean that you can't be very prescriptive in your zoning. So I would go that direction.
I guess I would feel better about this if the developers, before they even put pen to paper, they come and talk to us, whether it's in council or individually, because like I said, what happened last time is like, here's these three options, and look at them, where one, they looked cool. All three options had pluses and minuses, even if the density, even people that hated density were like, hey, that still looks kind of cool, right? But it was usually like this highest and best that might never have happened, right? Like, here's this 10-story Hyatt next to, like a corridor of restaurants. Like, that did look really cool, but the odds of that happening are low, right? And because of that, and that's fair and fine because it's the landowner, they can, they don't have to build the exact thing, we tell them or whatever. But I think if they come in and say, these are sort of our starting points, like, here's our pinch points, here is the minimum we want to see, here's the maximums we want to see. If they come in with some other ideas that we didn't think of that go above or below that or whatever, I mean, that's fine. I don't want to take away their creativity, but I think it would help make me feel better about it, because again, my home is almost in both of these circles, if before they start, they know what we want. And whether that is you helping us tell them that, right? Because like I said, I didn't think we could be that prescriptive in an ordinance, but if we can, that would be great if you can do that. But I think, in fairness to council, because then if we just get three things to vote on, I don't know, like, what if we don't like them? Or what if they didn't fall into, what we envisioned?
Yeah, and that's why when we were working with the consultant that we picked, that they, rather than just coming back at the end, they're coming back all the way through the entire process to speak with council as the council, so.
But I think they need I don't know if the very beginning was part of that phase, I guess.
It is. The initial phase is the, I can't remember what they call it, the project foundation phase. So, I mean, that's.
I just know it's really exciting to develop where you don't live, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Like where people don't live, they're like, it would look really cool to do these things where I don't live, but where you live, we're going to make this look cool. And not necessarily everyone that lives right there agrees with that.
Nate, one of my concerns with this is not about redeveloping the area. It's similar to what Councilmember Brown was saying. I don't know who it was, Yogi Berra maybe. It's like deja vu all over again. Maybe it was Yogi the Bear, I don't know, one of the two. But we've done this before, and these consultants are, I remember Leland Consulting from before. They may have very well done this already. So, $160,000 budget is, it's not going to make or break the city, but it's not an insignificant amount of money either to kind of recreate the wheel that we already looked at, voted on. We had workshops of people from the community coming in to look at these renderings, and, we allowed them to vote on what they thought was the one that they'd like to see in the area. So I'm just not a fan of paying consultant firms money for things, one, that's already been done, maybe not to the level that it needs to be done, but again, $160,000 seems to be a bit steep for that, especially when you get into like $14,000 for an implementation plan. A lot of that's already done. We did that 4 years ago, and it's not hard to put some words on a PowerPoint slide that says this is how we're going to implement the plan. I don't know that there's any reason to pay someone $14,000 to come up with an implementation plan, which is basically words on a PowerPoint slide that have already been written. So I don't know that this is the greatest use of $160,000 of the city's budget.
And again, this is a requirement of the state, and thankfully the state
doesn't
provided.
require us to spend $160,000.
The state provided WFRC with $160,000 to give out in grants to accomplish
Yeah, and
this specific thing.
That's fine, but that money comes from somewhere. It doesn't come from anywhere else but taxpayers' pockets. So,
You're
whether
right,
it's
but
a
I want to
pass-through.
be clear that it's not Midvale taxpayers paying $160,000 for this. You're right that it is taxpayer money, but from across the state of Utah. And I just want
Well,
to
yeah, I mean, that could be worse.
It's
Then you
not.
could say it's every citizen in Salt Lake County paying for it, rather than Midvale, So it's not good either way. What I'm saying is this work has been done. We've paid probably at least one or more of these consultants to do this work for us before. Now we're double paying them for the work, and it's just not, in my opinion, a great use of any sort of funds, whether it comes to us in grant form or not.
All I guess I would say is, one way or another, we're going to have to do this, and there are different requirements that the state's requiring us to have, and there are penalties if we don't get the plan done. And so, if we don't take the grant and follow through with this, and then would try to like morph the other plan into this, then we will be paying for it.
I just want to say how silly the state is for requiring something but having no requirements. You were required to make a plan, but we're not going to tell you what has to be in that plan. Like, we have zoning laws, right? So it's like, technically we have a plan already. So that's not your fault by any stretch of the
And,
imagination.
and that was communicated during the legislative session. I was about to say this year, but last year. And I think there were many different, because this is a round track station, specifically, I think Midvale had some concerns with our small square footage as a city and having 3 track stations. So us, Salt Lake City, having 20 track stations, however many it is. There was a few cities who said this is concerning, and we were one of them. And part of that was we've already done the planning here, but that wasn't really taken into consideration in the bill.
Yeah.
Okay. With that, I would entertain a motion.
I'll make the motion. I move that we approve resolution number 2023-R-04, authorizing the mayor to execute an agreement with the Wasatch Front Regional Council, WFRC, for Midvale Center and Midvale Fort Union Station area plan.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion on that? Rory, we call roll?
Yes, Councilmember Brown.
If we don't like the first pass, can we say no, or do we have to be done by a certain time?
There's a timeline on it, but it's a few years out. I'd have
Oh,
to-
okay, so if by fall they come in and we're like, no, go again, we're not going to get fined?
No,
or anything?
no. We're in the very first round of this, so we got the first round of money. There's several waves of funding that are coming out to get everybody.
Isn't it like we have to have it done by 2025, but if a developer comes in wanting to develop in the area, then it starts a 1-year clock for us
Yeah,
to get it done?
yeah, that's what it is.
Hold on, Ryan, can I make sure I understand your question? Were you asking the state law requires by a deadline, or were you saying we can pass, like, the consultants come up with the first plan, if we don't like it, we can say no? Was that the question?
Yeah, and if we say no, are we going to, not with the intention just to say no, but like, hey, go back to the drawing board, we don't like this. If it takes till 2024, will the state then fine us? That's what I was wondering about the timeline.
Yeah.
Because that makes a difference on my vote.
Because the contract, it goes through January 2024, right? So I think it's 160. If we don't like it and say go back to the drawing board and they have to come up with 2 or 3 iterations, the state's now fining us, we're not paying more. Well, Wasatch Regional Council isn't paying more than 160, right? It's a lump sum.
Yeah, and my hope would be that with the consultants coming back so much that you would get a product
Right.
out of it that you would like. I mean, that's the whole reason we've asked them to come back and they've wanted to come back, is they don't want to present something you don't want to approve.
Yeah, and then when I say it and that we're going to try to drag it out, it's just,
Yeah.
we want to make
Just
sure.
as long as we
get it
have
right.
control over doing it right, then I feel better about it. That's what I'm trying to.
Yeah,
make sure.
and even though just to be clear, the contract is with WFRC, the people working with the consultant is the city. It's Adam and the planning staff
Right.
and the RDA. It's not WFRC driving this process.
Right, no, I get that.
It's-
I just want to make sure we can go, this is not going in the direction we want.
Yeah.
But there's not some deadline like October 1st of this year, and then we're like, well, we got to approve something. That's what I'm getting at.
Garrett reminded me that we do have one development that has submitted on 72nd. I want to call it White Lotus. I forget the.
It's just Lotus, I think. Lotus, yeah.
Yeah, and
Does that trigger the 1 year?
and that might trigger the one.
I don't think that it does, but we'll look into that. I've thought about that and I've looked at that, and I don't think that triggers the 1 year. So I'm going to speak without having 100% accuracy on this, but I believe that if a developer comes in and wants to do a development that is not allowed within the zone, then that triggers the 1 year. The current development that we have is currently allowed within that zone because it is the TODO overlay zone right there where they're doing that. So that wouldn't trigger. But again, that doesn't trigger them that you have to give them what you want. That triggers that you have to do the station area plan because there's a developer waiting on it. It doesn't say that you have to give them whatever density is that they're asking for.
Okay, thank you. Yes.
Okay, Councilmember Gettle.
Just for the reasons I stated before, nothing to do with the plan itself or what might come of it, I vote no.
Sperry.
Aye.
Glover.
Aye.
And Robinson.
Aye.
Okay, that carries. Thank you. All right, moving on to item D, consider resolution number 2023-R05, authorizing the mayor to sign amendment number 2 to grade separated crossing agreement between Midvale City and Utah Transit Authority.
Hey. This one, I'm hoping that we got in the right order so that we're ending with one that's that you guys want. So this one is for, we've been working a long time about getting that sidewalk from City Hall down under the track station to connect on with 700 West on the east side of the street. Right now, that's just dirt trails there and nothing at all. This has gone through the process of being designed, and UTA is at a point now to sign off on it. They've provided this agreement. We already have a agreement to do this. The first amendment was to do the sidewalk on the west side of the street. This is the second amendment, almost identical to the first, to do the sidewalk on the east side of the street. This, because we're doing the City Hall campus plaza, we've worked with our plaza designing consultant to integrate this in. They've provided additional landscaping along that stretch of sidewalk there and the hillside that goes up to Main Street. And so when this gets bid out, it'll be bid out as one project, the plaza project and this sidewalk. But this agreement allows the city to construct that sidewalk. It's UDOT allowing that separated grade crossing of the tracks line. And then they've waived basically all of the fees associated with that other than the inspection fee, which they will still have to do the inspection on it. So they've left in that inspection fee of $420, but they've waived all of the other typical UTA fees on this. This one we are excited about because it will give more access to Main Street from both sides of the road. We've even had events where overstock is allowed people to park in that parking garage. This will allow people to cross the street right there at the light, which is a much safer crossing, and then come up that sidewalk into Main Street. So we're excited about the connectivity that this will bring. And we've been working with UTA for, I think, about 1.5 years to get this amendment from them. So we want to sign it.
I know that I was coming out of the road home the other day, and it looked like maybe those lights there don't have button crossings on them. At least maybe it did north to south, but not east to west at that intersection. Do you know if that's been addressed at all, if we're trying to make that more accessible from that?
That's not addressed in this contract, but we could work to address that. I know that they are across Holden, that there's signals across there. I'm not sure about the other road right there. But
I
yeah.
didn't notice any, but it could have just missed it.
Yeah, I've walked there. I'm just trying to think if I know I've pressed the buttons to go across. I just can't remember on that other street. I think I may have just walked across that. But yeah, I could talk with Keith about that. That wouldn't be part of this agreement. That's just a signal that we control.
Sounds good.
Good.
Garrett just answered my question, so thanks, Garrett.
What was the answer? Is there signals or is there not signals?
Yeah, because of how you were just looking at it, maybe Garrett could speak to it better than I am.
Because the two streets don't align, they have to go up to the Coliseum, and that's where the crosswalk is. Otherwise, they would cross into lanes of traffic coming
I see.
Yeah, so there's not any directly from the parking garage, but if they walk a little more.
It's in the intersection still. They just have to cross over.
Yeah. Mayor, I move that we approve resolution number 2023 R5, authorizing the mayor to, this is worded badly, authorizing the mayor to, let's go back to.
Sign.
Yeah, sign. To sign amendment number 2 to grade separated crossing agreement between Midvale City and Utah Transit Authority.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any discussion on that? Rory, will you call roll?
Yes, Councilmember Gettle.
Yes.
Sperry.
Aye.
Glover.
Aye.
Robinson.
Aye.
And Brown.
Yes.
All right, that carries. Thank you. All right, moving on to our first discussion item of the night. Discuss proposed amendments to section 5.08 of the Midvale City Code. We'll hear from Aubrey. This is Aubrey's first time presenting to the council.
And she's been waiting very patiently.
So patiently. Okay. Good evening, Mayor and council members. I'm Aubrey Ruiz. I am the Community Development Executive Assistant, and I am here to talk about some code amendments to Chapter 5.08. Just looking over things in our department, we've been trying to get things to make sure that everything is transparent and compliant with our own code. We are currently using a different document that was adopted for the fee schedule for the business license department, and we're hoping to update the code so that it is reflecting the adopted document. Currently, the language doesn't specify exactly what the money is being used for the business licensing fees, so we want to clarify that up a little bit, and then take out all of the hard numbers of the current fee schedule so that we can refer back to the annual fee schedule each year instead of having to amend the code each year to be compliant with all the correct monetary values. And that goes along with the bonding schedule as well. So, yeah.
Makes sense. I like it.
Pretty straightforward.
That was easy enough for your first attempt.
Yeah.
Good job.
Do you want to take longer?
No.
You don't have to.
I'm okay, but if you guys would like to ask me any questions or anything, I'm here for
So
you to.
you'll bring it back to us. How long until you think you'll have that ready and back to us?
So I actually already have the ordinance drafted up and just want legal to take another peek at it. And I was hoping if you guys didn't have too many questions, we could actually bring it back and consider it for a consent agenda item.
Ooh, I like it.
Yeah, I like
Sounds
that.
great.
Yep, definitely.
That's great.
She's
Just
good.
to clarify, this has nothing to do with the fee schedule.
This
Right.
is
The study.
This is increasing the amounts that you have to get approval for, right?
No,
Yeah.
so this is for the current one that we're using, not the study that's currently undergoing the finality. That hasn't been adopted yet. This is just for the previous one that we've been using in the department. And we just want to make sure that it's reflecting that in the code as well, because there are different numbers from what we've been using for the past couple of years.
And then going forward, the code will just say whatever we adopt annually is what it is, right? Not
Yes.
having to put the fees in the.
Like the actual number.
Yeah.
Correct.
Yeah.
Sounds great.
Okay, sounds like we're good with consent.
Awesome.
Okay, thanks, Aubrey.
Hey,
Good job.
thank you.
All right, discussion item B, discuss proposed amendments to the procurement code. Mariah.
Okay, similarly, we got a new procurement officer about the same time I started, and as we have been, as I've worked with her, and she has a history of working in procurement, has wanted to make some updates to our procurement code. So the first, we're going to go over threshold changes, exception changes, and then other changes. So just so you know, our thresholds are minor purchases, small purchases, and large purchases. Minor purchases are just that they are made with as much competition as is practical under the circumstance. We expect that people are looking a few places, making sure that they're being prudent with taxpayer dollars. Right now, currently, that is a $3,000 threshold. Small purchases require informal bidding procedures, so that we require that there are at least 3 quotes for those, and that's currently anything between $3,000 and $25,000, and a large purchase requires formal bidding, so an RFP, an invitation for bid, that sort of thing. That is currently anything over $25,000. Just due to inflation and kind of constraints that we're feeling from our departments, because some of these things, I think it feels like it's more than is needed. It feels like we could do a minor purchase, still make sure we're being prudent with taxpayer dollars and not have the constraints of all these. And also, there's a lot of things we purchase that you can't get quotes for. There's only one provider, that sort of a thing. So we're proposing to increase the minor purchase threshold to $7,500, small purchases between $75,000 to $50,000, and large purchases will be anything over $50,000. This doesn't change that anything over $100,000 will still need to come to the council. And puts us a little more, the state just increased all of their purchasing limits. It puts us in line with them or a little under. Their minor purchase limit is $10,000, but they do their stuff a little bit differently. For exceptions are things that, expenditures that can be made without formal or informal bidding procedures with the approval of the procurement officer, regardless of the amount. Beyond that $100,000 limit, that still has to come to you. So what we're proposing is updating our professional services exceptions and adding examples so that examples include but are not limited to accounting, architecture, art, construction, design and management, engineering, financial services, IT, law, medicine, psychiatry, and underwriting. So these are just things where if it wouldn't make sense to go out for a bid, maybe because we had a relationship or they already know the city from top to bottom, things like that, that we wouldn't need to follow some of those other procedures. Adding a state or federal funds exceptions, which would state that if we are using state or federal funds that require us to use their procurement codes and policies, that we would use those instead of ours. If someone gifts or bequests us money that has specific stipulations on how we spend it, then there would be an exception for that. And then adding a compatibility of parts or training exception. This happens in public works where we have specific pipes and we can only get, we would have to change out the whole system if we were going to get the lowest quote necessarily or whatever. So the compatibility of the parts would be an exception. And then just other changes are removing, we had to codify CARES Act expenditures as an exception, removing all parts of that, replacing requirements to post formal bids in the newspaper, and now we'll be posting those on our procurement platform, which is very accessible. And then remove our public opening of bids requirement. That's pretty outdated because of the procurement platform that we use. We don't need to like hold a in-person meeting the way that it happens online. Assures that it's fair. And then changing the evaluation of bids to include the procurement officer as the facilitator, not as an evaluator. She doesn't feel like she needs to do that. She's not an expert matter on most of the things that we're procuring. And then everything else are just clerical clarifications and changes. Do you have any questions?
No question, but
Yes.
just a comment. I know, I remember 2020, I think it was, we redid these numbers as well. And at that point, we went sometimes double and even triple the previous amount. So just being that financial kind of watchdog, that is all of our jobs as elected officials, you know, when we, in a 2-year period, when we go from like doubling that threshold to now doubling it again, it's getting into an area of slight uncomfortability for me personally. You know, I wouldn't expect our numbers to be in line with the state, considering the state's budget versus the city of Midvale's budget. So I will have those concerns with that when it comes back to us for a formal vote. I just wanted to mention that, put that on the record now.
I think, yeah, we put them out there. I think that there's other department heads that would speak to like just the time that to go into some of those informal bidding
Can I
processes.
jump in?
Yeah.
Sorry,
Yeah.
Public Works does a lot of purchasing. Would you say 75% or more for the city?
Maybe, yeah.
Okay, so we do a lot of purchasing. With supply chain issues and with costs going up, we are, I will say spending, but in my mind wasting a lot of time trying to run down quotes and trying to run down vendors that won't give you quotes because they all have different sales territories. I have been hounding to get the limit up to 10,000 just for time savings. To
For
put things
small
in,
purchases.
Put things in perspective, a fire hydrant's $3,500. You order 2 hydrants, we gotta go through the whole process. We've got a chiller out, a critical piece of well equipment that keeps the well cool in the summer while it runs. This is one that we're dealing with now. It's $7,700. We have spent, I don't know, 6 to 8 hours just trying to round up quotes, and I can tell you we will be very fiscally responsible, not stepping out of bounds. This creates efficiencies in a major way.
That's something I would suggest, you know, putting into the presentation to let us know, because right now, without that knowledge, it just seems to me, you know, I remember when the minor purchase was 1,000 or 1,500, and then we approved 3,000. Now you want to approve 7,500. Like, is next time 15,000?
You're right. They were not arbitrary numbers. I think, I mean, my IT department feels the same way. There's a lot of stuff that it just like, it doesn't make sense anymore to be going through all this big process, because for one, probably you're going to get back really similar quotes anyways, and the time spent in those things. Though these thresholds are up to you, and if you are uncomfortable with them, I will also let you know that with Susan here, and me taking on this role, we have, I think, cracked down on procurement in a way that that's also probably why there's more pain to it, because if you ask me to approve something that's over $3,000 right now, I'm not going to do it if I don't see through 3 quotes or that you reached out for 3 quotes. And I don't know that, I'm not trying to throw everyone under the bus, but I think that it has, prior to me, but it has, because we have cracked down on it, then there is more pressure as well on people to make sure. I mean, I think I go back to Matt, like every time he puts in a requisition, because I'm like, well, you didn't, I need to see the state purchasing, I need to, all the things.
Yeah,
So,
and I just want to, you know, I have nothing but faith in you guys who work here each day. It's just, you know, we are elected to, you know, keep an eye on dollars and cents, and I feel that, you know, we were pretty, you know, we've just gone along with it, and it's been, okay, let's do that, that makes sense, but at some point, it has to be like, you know, not going up double every 2 years.
Yeah.
A smaller incremental change would probably be more palatable.
So are you requesting that
Well,
specifically? Or we can-
I'm just one of a member of 6 elected officials. You know, I would suggest, you know, what Glenn said made sense whenever, you know, that's like, oh, it costs this amount of money to get.
He's
3
really been pushing me for 10,000, so
quotes.
there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I'm going
That's-
to rephrase. Susan hasn't cracked down. She's restructured. There's some structure. There's a lot more things to follow, and increasing these limits is just an increase in limits. It's not an increase in the double checks and the processes and all the things that we still have to go through.
Yeah.
Just throwing that.
And we don't want, we obviously, there could be emergencies or whatever. And if you then create 2 POs to stay under the threshold, that's worse, in my opinion, than or, for instance, the fire hydrants is a good example. If you needed 2, but, so to get around it, you order 2.
Yeah.
That looks a lot worse, both from an audit perspective and just.
That may or may not be some of the structure that Susan has in.
Yes.
So, I mean, I like what Councilmember Gettle said, is include some of the discussion about the efficiencies in there so that a lot of people understand why. I mean, I'm not opposed to the dollar amounts. I think if you highlight that so that we can be more efficient, but then also talk about how we still have those protections and the safeguards in place, right? So that you don't have the 3 quotes, but we've got these other things in place to make sure that we're not having fraud or other things. I think that would be important, just so that everybody knows that we're not trying to be more efficient by exposing ourselves to fraud, because
Okay.
we definitely don't want that.
I don't believe this has to come back for a public hearing. So would you like me to just present this again next week and with that, or is
But we're
what we've
not-
stated? Sorry, 2 weeks. Yeah, sorry.
Hold on.
Yeah, so this is a discussion item. If it comes back as an action item, you know,
Present
perhaps,
that information.
mention those
I
inefficiencies.
think it was like in my head to say
Yeah.
those things, and it was in the staff report, right? This is about being prudent with, honestly, if you hear me talk about my job, I am like, I'm a steward of public funds. The weight of that is on my chest all the time. But then I didn't say it, and I didn't put it in my slides, so now it sounds
You were
like
so excited about the audit and no negative findings.
I thought this was the easy one, and it wasn't. The audit was
No, it's,
easy.
I think with that in it, I'll be perfectly fine with the language.
The
Okay.
only one I'm concerned about is minor's fine, small purchases seems like $50,000 to me doesn't sound like a small purchase.
So, okay, yeah.
Large purchases, 50,000 up would be a large purchase. So I'm just concerned that we're going from, what is it, 7,500 to 50,000, isn't that right?
So currently, it's 3 to 25,000.
Right.
Yeah.
So 75 to 50. I mean, I would look at the minor and maybe even increase that a little bit and cut down the small purchases a little bit. The problem is, I've seen this over and over again. We get vendors, we get cities coming in, and they'll buy one mower at a time, so they don't have to go over their purchase.
Right. We don't want to do that.
That's what I was saying, yeah.
So that
against our
actually,
procurement code.
if you come in and buy 3 at a time, you might get a better deal.
Right.
But
Well, and that they're at minimum breaking probably policy doing that, if not law.
They probably are, but that's what happens in reality.
Paul's gonna
Yeah,
black
no,
them
I
now.
know. I totally know.
So the 50, but for the small purchase, the words that we use to define them is weird. So the 7,500 to 50,000 would require quotes from 3 different vendors within that threshold. So they would have to have, but if you would like them to have to go out to an RFP.
Well,
So the other thing is
I'm fine with the, I guess it's the wording. Small,
Yeah, it's-
and we're saying small and we're going up to 50,000. That doesn't seem compatible.
Should we call it a medium purchase?
Right. It just doesn't sound right.
No, it isn't.
It is true,
And
it goes from minor
the
to
other
small
thing is
to
that
large.
over 50,000, if
Not
we do,
small,
that
medium,
threshold
large.
there requires an RFP, which is usually at least a 6-week process, if not more, to
Well, I
get,
can
just to even get that out.
Garrett, how do you feel about RFPs versus 3 quotes?
So much fun. I mean, I will say, this has been one of the issues of why Susan's job exists, is because the number of purchases that were coming to the city attorney's office to be reviewed, because we had to have a contract in place before it went out. We were slowing things down because it just was overwhelming. I can tell you that currently we have 3 or 4 RFPs that I'm hoping as soon as Aaron starts on Monday, some of those will be getting the attention they deserve again.
And maybe
It's just
the
calling
word-
it small.
Maybe it's just the wording, but it's just like, to me, if I read that, the city, anything up to $50,000 is a small purchase. It's like, maybe the first one ought to be small, then then large. I don't know. It just doesn't sound right.
Small, large, and ultra.
Whatever.
I know in my household, a minor purchase is not $3,000 to $7,500.
But also, I don't think your
That would
budget
be
is
a large
$25 million,
purchase.
probably. Okay, I will make some adjustments and bring this back to you as an action item next week. I'll see if I can find some other words we could use.
I'm not against raising it. I'm just,
Feels a little weird, I get it. Thanks.
Thank you.
Mariah.
All right, we do have a closed session tonight to discuss the character, professional competence, or physical or mental health of an individual. And with that, I would entertain a motion to go into closed session.
Here I move that we go into a closed session to discuss the character, professional competence, or physical or mental health of an individual.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any discussion on that? Rory, we call roll?
Yes, Councilmember Sperry.
Aye.
Gettle.
Yes.
Brown. Brown.
Yes.
Robinson.
Aye.
And Glover.
Aye.